Hello, it's Walter, and it's a little bit windy. I got my fan going because I'm going to be doing some welding, so hopefully it won't be too noisy on the microphone. Um, I'm going to show you what I'm building, and I got my bench all done. I just got to paint it, touch it up, clean it up a little bit, and it'll be good for a lot of years. Um, so I'm also making something else, so let's take a look at that. So in my last video, I was telling you about my bench, and I showed you that little tube and the length of rod, which is this part right down here. And what had happened is over the years, this plate fatigued, metal fatigued right down here, and it cracked, and it finally broke off. And so this bench was all rickety and everything. So what I did is I had to cut this tubing off, this tube off, and I had to cut the little brackets off here, this part of it, what was left, a little stub, and ground that all down, filed it, cleaned it up, sanded this tube out more, which I showed you in that video with the drill sander. And I'll keep this oiled. And this bench I bought years ago. It's probably 30 years old at least, and it's been out in the weather most of its life. It wasn't designed for that. The tolerance between the rod and the tube was too close, so any little rust, it would start binding. And then when it got worse, I tried to keep it oiled, but it didn't help. And so what happened is eventually, in trying to tip the bench upright and put it back down, it would grab so much in here where the rod and the tube is that it created so much friction and stress on this as I tried to move it that it finally cracked and broke. So I reinforced this all and welded on both sides. Got the tube where it's got more clearance in there, and I'll keep it oiled, try to keep it out of the weather. And then down the road, when I have several projects to paint at once, I'll probably clean it all up and repaint it. And then this part just goes into here, spring loaded. But now this is nice and solid. And then this is the other half. This part I did not cut off. I just left it on here and redid this whole plate. Took the seat off. This actually flips up. So when you have your back inclined, you don't scoot off the end of your bench. So I reinforced this too, so it's nice and solid now. Okay, so hopefully this isn't too windy for you. Feels good to me anyways. I had some scrap metal, and I'm actually making a bracket out of this, and I need to weld this smaller tube perpendicular to this larger tube. And so I needed a way to fix this on here while I weld it. So I just used baling wire. A hose clamp would work too, but when I tack this on here, I'll probably end up melting the wire, so I didn't want to ruin a good hose clamp just for this. So I just used some baling wire, and I'll kind of center this equidistant in the middle of this here on both sides, and then I'll tack that up. And then what I did is I took a piece of cardboard and cut this, so this will be my side bracket. There's a lot of ways I could make brackets, but this is how I decided to do it. And I cut out this out of flat stock on my bandsaw, and then I simply filed it out, rounded it out a little bit, and beveled it somewhat, so it'll fit on here a lot nicer. And I'll just weld that all up like that. So I'm going to show you that process right now. Be a little easier welding this thing if it was clamped where it wouldn't wiggle around. But we're getting it done. Okay, so there's one down, one to go. It was a little crooked when I first tacked it on there, so I broke it loose and redid it. You know, I'm not the best welder, but I can weld good enough where this isn't going to come free at all. And so I'll make up the nut. So I'll fix up the other bracket, and I'll make that one, and then I'll show you what these are for. But it's lined up pretty good. It'll work for our purposes, and I'll just kind of egg this out a little bit more. I might end up putting a brass bushing in here, and I'll show you why. So let me get the other one done, and then I'll show you what I'm using it for. Now you can see what I actually made here. I press fit a bearing in here. They're a little bit loose on here. I didn't quite get the tolerance that I wanted, but it's close enough for what I'm doing because it's not super critical. I just wanted a bronze bushing in here because I didn't want steel on steel rubbing so much. I made this style a number of years ago. I made this for a smaller 1-inch diameter pipe or bar, and that simply goes through one of the holes in the power rack, and then this pin drops in there from the other side, locks it in. And I've got 2 of these, and I've used these for a lot of things, like it's how I set up to do dips, and also sometimes I do like landmine type stuff by dropping my pin way down low, and then you know, I can train different ways, almost like I'm using a landmine. But this is the original one I made, and I'll still use these for some things. But this is a new one, and it works really good. I tested it out. I normally don't put any type of spring clamp on here. I just did that to demonstrate that if you wanted to, you could lock your bar in, you know, with any type of collar or clamp, so it doesn't move back and forth on you and it can't slide. Sometimes it's advantageous to put like a spring clamp on here so that I can adjust how far my bar sticks out on the other end. And I do that sometimes. And if you're worried that this might pop out, well, you can put a clamp on the other side, and just a spring clamp works really good for that. But I'll show you the other side. So this will give you a little bit better idea looking from the other end, the free end. By getting on this end and putting some plates on here, I can lift this in different ways. I can set 2 bars up on here, and then I can adjust the far end with the swivel on it, the swivel bracket. I can adjust that low or high, so that'll change the angle of this. And then by changing this pin height right here, up or down, I can do several things. Like I can lower the swivel side down low and then put this pin down low to the bottom, and then with 2 bars, I can grab it like I'm grabbing a wheelbarrow, and I can do wheelbarrow type lifting with it. Though it'd be nice to have a wheelbarrow to push around, and at some point when I get maybe in a different place where I've got room for something like that, I'll either make one, or this is probably what I'll do because I'll make it heavy duty. But anyway, so in this little board you see back here, I set that up on the pins in my power rack, and I can adjust the height, and that's my adjustable bench. You probably see me talk about that in other videos, but I also use it for doing reverse hyperextensions. And it's got little brackets on either end, so I can actually slide the pins through it and lock that bench in so it won't even move, and it's pretty solid. But just a simple little bracket that I made, and it adds a great deal of versatility to my training in my power rack. So I can do body weight stuff on here, dips. I can do landmine type stuff on my power rack now. I've got a basketball full of concrete with a tube in it that I'll slide my bar into, and I do landmine type stuff like that. But sometimes you want a different angle, or you want the pivoting end. With my little swivel brackets I made, sometimes you want them higher, maybe a foot off the ground, maybe 5 feet off the ground, and it changes the dynamic and the leverage when you put weight on the other end of your bar and what you're trying to do. So I can set these pins up higher, and with a swivel pivot on one side, and then this pin higher, I can dip underneath it a little bit, and then I can actually do overhead presses and like split jerks and push presses with a parallel grip on 2 barbells. So, and that's things I'll show you down the road. Well, it gives you a pretty good idea right now of what the brackets are for. So this is Walter. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be showing you other things with this bracket, how I'm going to be using it in training. Same with my landmine concrete basketball I made. I'm going to other projects down the road that I'm working on. Some are in partial assembly, and I'll be finishing videos on that and sharing that stuff with you also. And then we'll gradually be getting into more and more training-oriented videos. So stick around. Hope you enjoyed this. Share it with others, and please subscribe. And I hope you have a great weekend.